guys, I want to read to you something about worship. It's not what you think, you become what you behold. That's what this book is saying here. This is the book I was telling you about. It's not what you think. It says the author here, his name is Bitek, best-selling New York author, Bitek. He says, when I was in high school, I played on the baseball team, and we were pretty good at it. Anyway, he said that was 8 years ago. And he said his shoulder popped out of place. And he said the pain was immediately searing, but I thought I'd wear it off in a few seconds. He had a shoulder that popped out of place playing baseball. And he said, when I tried to get up, I literally couldn't move my arm. It just laid flat by my side. And he said, while I was retching back and forth on my knees, when the coach and a few others came to meet me out there, we realized just how serious it was because I couldn't move. They had to cut off my jersey to take a look. My collarbone was sticking out an inch or two from where it normally should be. I lay completely shattered, I think I had completely shattered it. Anyway, my season was over. No more baseball, no more playing, no more shot at the state championship. I broke my collarbone, so I couldn't play. After that, I had a lot of time to think because there isn't much to do in a hospital bed besides eat Jello and watch TV, right? So the weird part was that even though it wasn't permanent, even though we didn't know for sure at the time, I lost a huge part of my identity in a flash. I had been playing competitive baseball since I could remember. Thousands of dollars, tons of equipment, trainers, trip, time, energy, sweat. My life orbited around baseball. It was a pillar, a center of gravity in my life. And then in a moment, it was gone. It's human nature. We only notice the true value of something once it's gone. When baseball was taken from me, I realized I didn't just like it, I worshiped it. I was defined by it. I got my worth from it. It was my God, my functionality, my Savior. Of course, I never have said that, but my life pointed to that. Going back to the Garden of Eden, we see humans were put in a unique space. We were below the Creator and above the creation. We were created in God's image, meaning we had a capacity no one else did. We had the weight of reflecting the very person who spun the earth into existence. He gave us that capacity. The best way I've ever heard this explained is we are like mirrors slanted 45 degrees. We were created to stand in the middle place. God's glory, love, and likeness shine down on us, and like any slanted mirror should, we reflect that goodness and beauty into the world, out into the world. It works backward too. As image bearers, our God is to be gardener as Adam was before he ate the fruit. We are to take raw materials, make something creative and beautiful, and then offer that to God as worship. A gardener shapes, cultivates, plants, and ultimately brings value to something that before had no value. So to take sounds of instrument and make music, to take vegetables and herbs and make a beautiful meal, to take paint and canvas and make art. That's also the definition of a priest, someone who takes something and offers it as a praise on behalf of others to God. Our job is to take the world beauty out of chaos and offer it back to God as worship. You know, that's our job. He said our job is to take the world and take the beauty and take the chaos, take everything that is given to us and offer it back to God as worship. God in the garden called us to cultivate by holding that mirror at a 45-degree angle. It's a two-way thing. Something comes down and reflects out, and something comes from out and reflects up. When we reflect the beauty and goodness of the Creator out into the world, we are fulfilling this. And when we take the world and offer it through that mirror up to God, we are doing this as well. But the minute Adam and Eve ate the fruit, the mirror shattered. It still might give a reflection of some sort, but we all know broken mirrors certainly don't give accurate reflections. We are, let's see if I can turn the page. We are no longer reflect God once the mirror is shattered, of course. But we are like broken shards of glass reflecting that very first sin, the desire to be like God. We reflect evil, chaos, power, greed, corruption, addiction. And it can all be traced back to worship. When sin happened and the cosmos broke, a vacuum was created. Our life was in shalom. We were in a flourishing garden, an earth with beauty, art, and amazing color. We were fully human. We knew God and walked with Him in the garden. We were orbiting around God and everything He offers, goodness, beauty, peace, and rhythm. But when the fracture happened, the center of ours became void. The center became void. It got replaced. And like any good vacuum, stuff started getting sucked into the center. God was no longer in our hearts. So it was easy to let the first thing we came across take its place. Things we were created to dominate now dominate us. The things we were to create and cultivate now enslave us and rule us. The rule of the garden had been reversed. We no longer had dominion, we had slavery. And that is still happening today. Everything is vying from our attention, Everything is asking for our all. The sex, the beauty, the security, athletes, money, self-worth. Searching for these outside of God becomes our everything. Baseball wasn't my sport, it was my God. And there's a big difference. That's the definition of an idol. Something that promises to fulfill what only God truly can. It calls on our good desires for love, for intimacy, fullness, purpose, but then turns them from a good thing to a God thing. It puts the fulfillment of desire on a throne and then becomes our master. Isn't that something? That's what he said. He said the baseball had become like his God because he was putting every bit of energy that he had into it instead of taking that baseball and offering it back to God as a sacrifice, as a praise, And then next one he says, we are statues sent from the capital. Now this is interesting. When ancient capital cities are excavated, it is where to find statues of whatever god or king ruled there. Rome, for example, hardly had any statues of Caesar. Most statues of rulers were found in the colonies far away from the capital. Statues or images are a way of saying who is in charge, whether it's a huge statue or a face on a coin. The people know who is their Lord when they see his face, even in a place he may never have visited. The statue set up in a colony 1,000 miles from Rome is a way of saying Caesar is Lord. It serves as a reflection and reminder. And so are we. We are living, breathing statues on earth as image bearers of who is in charge. The problem, though, is that unlike statues, we can turn around and say no. No, I don't want to worship you. No, I don't want to represent you. No, I don't want to reflect you. That's when the Bible says phrases like God gave us over to false gods and worship of the creation instead of the creator. There are two significant consequences every time we make that decision. We are no longer able to properly reflect him, and we become like the idols we worship. Think about the statues again in the colonies. If for some reason Rome gave up on a colony and let it be, and it no longer maintained or cleaned the statues, they would deteriorate and crumble. Why then are cut off? Why they are cut off from the source? When they are cut off from the source, they don't realize they are cutting themselves off from the very thing that gives them their being. If Rome writes off a few statues and no longer takes care of them or give them over to themselves, those statues quickly will no longer be representing Rome. They will simply be rubble and a pile of marble or stone. When we decide to worship something besides God, that same thing happens with us. We begin to lose the thing that makes us human. Our humanness begins to crumble. As image bearers, we have weight. But we abdicate that responsibility. We lose that weight. Our glory begins to fall. We become ruins of what He created us to be. Now, of course, we never fully lose that image while we are alive. No matter how hard you scratch, gnaw, or pull, you can't get the image of God off of you fully. That's still glory residue, no matter how hard you try. But the principle that is impossible to escape is we can't be image neutral. We will reflect or become more and more like something or someone else that's not God. When heaven crashes down onto earth, it looks like we are reflecting and imaging God's very own self in us. But to keep God from coming close, the only thing we have to do is worship something else as ultimate. Like the statue, it immediately cuts off from the source and takes away our humanness. It's a scary question, but one that should be asked. What would you be like if the thing that made you human, the image and likeness of God, was taken away from you? The C.S. Lewis novel, The Great Divorce, hell is painted as a picture of what happens when that image is fully removed. Heaven is inhabited by solid people, and hell is inhabited by ghosts. There is a weight in heaven that is so real, so thick, it's painful. It's painful to the ghosts. In hell, they live hundreds of miles away from the nearest person, and hell is airy, thin, ghost-like. But heaven is dense, huge in proportion to hell. The bodies have weight, as if they were made from that place. When the people in hell visit heaven, even the blades of grass are too dense to walk on. So the C.S. Lewis novel, The Great Divorce, you guys got to read that novel. It says, when the people in hell visit heaven, even the blades of grass are too dense to walk on. It's painful to them because they have been dehumanized by wanting to worship themselves and other things. The very thing that made them truly human, namely God's reflected image in them, was scratched away. Reality is harsh to the feet of shadows. They don't have the image in them. They don't have that weight of glory. They are now subhuman sub-images. And that's the logical conclusion of idolatry. It's colluding with evil to wipe away our humanness and to worship things that are not God. If we want to live our lives refusing the image of God in us, which is also the very thing that makes us human, hell becomes a place where God finally says, okay. Which leads us to the second consequence. When God is no longer the image we orbit, then we become like whatever takes His place. Either we worship God and become like Him, or we worship something else and become like it. For example, when baseball was my life, I realized I subtly but surely became defined by my statistics. Baseball is a game of stats, and my very person began to be defined by those numbers. I wasn't human regardless of how I played on the baseball field. I was whatever kind of day I had on the baseball field, worth nothing on a bad day, puffed up on a good day. Another idol in my early life was sex. Porn took me down. This path of promise followed by despair. And from the immense amount of emails I get on the subject, I know I'm not alone. We might refer to ourselves as Christian or Muslim or Buddhist, but I argue that the biggest religion in the world is sexual fulfillment. We live in a society so entrenched, so addicted, it's blinding to us. Don't believe me? 2.3 billion emails per day are pornographic. 1 out of every 4 search engine requests is porn related. Sex and porn are among the top 5 search terms for kids under 18. 35% of all internet downloads are pornographic. Sex is a god, and like any god, when you worship it, you become like it. By the way, that knowledge is true, thousands years old. Those who make them become like them. So do all who trust in them. Whatever you behold, you become like. Whatever you worship, you turn into. Whatever you turn your gaze to, it rubs off on you. Everything becomes colored by the idol. So many guys today don't see women as made in the image of God with inherent worth, dignity, and value. Instead, they see them as objects. They dehumanize them because of all the hours they spend on a computer screen watching their fantasies fill that lie. Women are simply there to satisfy men's desires, but little do they realize that when they dehumanize a girl, they too become hollow. Their humanness starts to decay. They become objects themselves. They erode their dignity, beauty, and the residue of God's image become a pawn or commodity. When you worship sex, you don't see humans, you see objects. When you worship money, you don't see humans, you see transactions. When you worship power, you don't see humans, you see pawns. And in turn, you become like those things. We all worship something. So he goes on and on to talk about how you become not like God, but the thing that you worship, or the thing that you're spending all your energy and time on. That's what you become like. Anyway, I'm 17 minutes in. I'll read some more of this to you another day. Let's take a break. Have a great evening.